Well, hello everyone. Welcome to another episode of Harebrained Games. We're doing to do the year in games. Now you see me do the week in games, but now we're doing the annual year in games. It's the segment I do every year except for any year that isn't this year. And so we're going to go through the months. It's a little bit different. Go through each month, and I'm going to give you, from the gaming perspective, highs and lows. And then I'm going to give you, from a life perspective, highs and lows. Because if I've realized one thing, it's that everyone here, the subscribers, the zealous folks that help me out and just be there for me and just create a great environment, everyone's got a backstory, and that backstory changes on a dime. So why not? Let's just get rolling. Let's get into January. Now, in January, the best game that I played in January was 303 Squadron. It's a long time to remember back, but it had some very tricky rules. It wasn't your average airplanes on a map, spatial map. It was kind of more like a story with some very nuanced combat. I really enjoyed that. I ended up playing that at a board game retreat a couple times, and it continues to be very popular ask for those who already know how to play the game. Again, there was a nice play area that was done that helps out a lot. It's been a year, lots of questions answered. I really liked it. It was one of my favorite Kickstarter backings ever, for just because of how plucky they were in making it happen. What were the highs of that month in life? Well, we realized that we had some property over at a place called Camino, and we just hadn't, it's been years and years, we had co-owned it, and we're like, we're never going to do anything with it. Life has changed, and so we made a choice to sell that property to find some other place that we could make more of a better use for my family and for legacy and down the road. That was the high point. The low point was selling property and finding out all the insane laws and taxes and ramifications and details that went on with it. Not being a business guy, I learned a lot. So anyway, that was January. Now let's get into February. In February, the best game I played was Red Flag over Paris. Game On Con, which is a board gaming, wargaming conference that takes place in February in or near Seattle, was going on at that time, and I ended up sitting down, and I didn't like its predecessor, Fort Sumter, not at all. And so I bought it for its inexpensive cost. I sat down with the vendor that was there, who always, just a great guy, and played it and realized it was absolutely an evolution in that system that made me really excited for it, not just from a solo perspective, but from the two-player perspective. And I learned a lot. So the highs were, as I mentioned, the Game On Conference, where I meet some of my favorite people once a year. We go through, we play games, it's very chill, everyone's just a class act, just love it. The lows were, this was a point in which we started to see my mom declining from dementia and Alzheimer's, and we've been working with her for about 10 years with early onset Alzheimer's, early onset dementia. But it really, really started to get more acute the last couple of years, and February was probably one of the first low points that we had this year with that. And that kind of, gaming is fun, but life kind of puts a perspective on everything. So that's that. Let's get into March. What happened in March that was interesting? In March, the best game that I played was Dead Reckoning, a pirate game. And I'd played several pirate games from earlier years this year and did some reviews and such. But Dead Reckoning was by far my favorite as far as fun. Now, I'm still looking for the perfect pirate game out there. Sid Meier's Pirates, put forth. Merchants Marauders is still at the top of the game. This one was a fun endeavor, however, especially with its wild sort of combat and the spreading out and expanding out. I really liked that one. That was the high point of March. Life-wise, the high point was having all the family together in one place for a birthday dinner. That never happens. The older they get, the harder it is to have family actually showing up. So props to that. That was a wonderful high point. The low point was that my youngest son was in the hospital. He got so ill he couldn't even stand up. It was several days of just really, really kind of frightening kind of stuff, because my son is this Nordic healthy kid who never gets sick, and so this was kind of a new low point for us. Thankfully he recovered, all was well, he was back in business and ornery as ever and wanting to get up and not do what the doctor ordered, just fine. The other thing is, we while we were doing that, the refrigerator broke behind the scenes and we didn't know it, which flooded the upstairs and part of the downstairs, and meant that we spent the next 4 months without really a kitchen or an upstairs bathroom and a downstairs laundry room while they repaired all of the damage. Glad for the insurance, not glad for the deductible, but that was kind of a big pain in the butt in March. So now let's get into April. In April, the best game I played was Plains Indian Wars. That was a great game with a trickier rulebook than it should have been to figure out for people, particularly because of the way that it spread out rules between 2, 3, and 4 players. It had a solo play was put in at the last minute. Did a great job on the solo play. Really liked the game. I blinged it out since. Been looking for awesome little miniatures. Got some tips for how to make this game. It's a gorgeous, gorgeous game. And I enjoyed it. There wasn't a lot else I bought in April, but that's one that I remember as enjoying. The highs was we drove far into the wilderness to look at a potential property at this very rustic cabin on 26 acres over in eastern Washington, next to a national forest, a national park. Oh my gosh. The low point was that same trip, watching my wife almost vomit the entire way, because once you got to the entrance, you had to go 5 miles in over 1-lane gravel roadway with 500 to 700 foot drop-offs that absolutely would, yeah, there was no way. And when we got to the property, the cabin was nice. The property was basically 26 acres of sagebrush. So, oh well, we tried. In May, I played a game called Zap Attack. Now, it hasn't held on too long. I haven't played it too much since. It's probably one of the simplest little, like, collect resources, convert them kind of games you'll see. It's pleasant. It's very pleasant. Just not very memorable. And May was not really the month that I did a lot of stuff on that. However, there's a reason for that, because the high point in that month was the birth of my grandson, Easton. And Easton was born. Oh my gosh, that was an amazing time. Additionally, my daughter graduated with a doctorate in ministry and went on a pilgrimage to Turkey for 10 days. And that was amazing. Some of the things she saw, just as a history person, it just, oh, I wanted to be there. I wanted to teleport there, see these things, and come back. The low point was I also, in one of my basketball runs, I run a basketball program at my church twice a week, is I ended up breaking my nose in 8 places. That sucked. That absolutely sucked. Because they're like, you can't exercise. I'm like, I must exercise. It's how I do what I do. And so I ended up not enjoying that, but good things came of it. Tells you sometimes good things come from situations that seem like they're really, really bad. So we'll talk about that. And the other thing is my wife's cancer. She'd been fighting ovarian cancer for 3 years now, since 2018, and unfortunately it was back for the 3rd time, I believe, which meant that we were going to have to reorganize again and reconfigure the chemotherapy treatments. That's never good news. So then we get to June. Now in June, I had a great time with a game, another Kickstarter that I really enjoyed and thought was wonderfully done, called Stars of Ikarios. This was probably my busiest month of the year for posting videos. For some reason, sometimes it's just kind of like nice to just get away from all of the craziness and do videos, and other times it's nice to just get away from the videos and go deal with the craziness. That's the way life goes. The highs was I started on a weight program, realizing that I was heavily overweight, and playing basketball was not actually helping me outrun all of the Chinese food and chocolate cake and donuts and cookies. I decided to take stock and try a different weight program, and so I wanted to lose 70 pounds by this Christmas. And so that's what he did. And then the low point is, it turns out losing weight is hard, that you have to change your lifestyle, especially like your board game habits, your life habits, your grazing habits, your eating habits. It's not as easy as it doesn't look. So anyway, that's that. Then on to July. In July, we had an exciting game come out from one of my favorite designers, Flashpoint South China Sea. This got a lot of buzz, and I think it was well deserved. It was an excellent first foray into a series, and I was excited to take advantage of that. The high point was heat. We finally got heat. We had a really cold first 6 months of the year, and then it just blast heat. I don't mean the board game. I mean heat, the actual heat that comes out of your furnace. And 4th of July was insanely fun. We had almost everybody, no, we did have everybody on 4th of July for the first time. And we shot off hundreds of dollars of fireworks. That never happens. But this year, it allowed it. The low point was, I can't stress enough how much chemo sucks, and I can't stress enough how Alzheimer's and dementia suck. That's just the gift that keeps on giving. Anyway, moving on. In August, I did something unusual. My best game, the game I had the most time with, was a throwback to a game I've had for many years, Middle-earth Quest. This is one of a first of a series of games where I reviewed games that I'd played in the past and kind of thought, hey, how do I like them now? This one was particularly of interest because I just felt like it didn't get enough love, and I'd love a reprint on it. The other highs are Heat. Yes! The Heat continues. We looked at some properties. Camping. We went to camp. My wife does a camp she's a nursing director, and so she has a bunch of houses of people on ventilators or differently abled, and stuff, and every year they do a camp, and believe me, these residents absolutely love it. It seems low budget to the rest of us, but man, it meant a lot, and it was fun to see that and have that. And the other thing was hunting for properties. We needed to find, we'd sold property, we needed to find property. It turns out there are rules and things that you have to do, and so that was a lot of fun. The other low, however, was that other than my family and I, COVID was just hitting all around us at the time. A lot of people were getting COVID and were down for about a week. So friends, family, gaming, all that stuff. So we survived. We were in the eye of the storm without being touched. So cool. In September, I did another revisit called War of the Ring. I reviewed War of the Ring, 2nd edition, and it still holds up as one of my favorites of all time, for those of you who are curious. I also played the worst game that I've actually played at all this year, but we'll get into that in another list. And the other highs are Heat. Can I tell you how much I love Heat? We found a property in the mountains that was perfect and only an hour away. It was beautiful. It was blissful. It was right next to some property that my mentor from my past had there, and so we ended up getting it. I also ran a 10K. I have almost lost 50 pounds. I'm not going to make the 70, but I lost 45 pounds to run the 10K, and I got to go to a Sabaton concert. September was pretty darn good. The lows were, we had the largest forest fire in the history of Western Washington, and it got, on the day that the property was to close, that fire got within 2 miles of the property. It had burned thousands and thousands and thousands of acres, but thank the Lord, it got right 2 miles to the property, and that's as far west as it got. So we were spared having to figure out whether we just bought a moonscape or not. So life is good. And that brings us to October. We're getting closer to where we are now. In October, I did a review of Brian Boru, which has quickly overtaken Deep Sea, Deep Sea Mission, or Mission Deep Sea, of the Crew, as one of my favorite trick-taking games. I couldn't introduce it to everybody the way I could The Crew, but boy, it's meaty, and boy, it's a lot of fun, and I just like the vibe that it has. It's sort of like The Crew meets Furnace with a spatial map, and I love that. The highs were also Heat, not just Heat. We had a small break in the chemo session where there was an extra week off, and so we took that opportunity to go to Las Vegas, which I've never been to. My wife and I had not been on a trip for almost 10 years, ever, anywhere, to do anything, and so it was an opportunity now. It was tricky. She was very sick. I mean, you just don't get over, you don't stop being sick when you're on chemo. You basically the permanent flu. In the first couple days and the day back, it was really hard on her, but there was a small glimpse of time in between when she mustered the energy, and we got to go to the Grand Canyon, and I got to see Las Vegas, and I thought it was a nice, despite the fact that it was really hard on her, we got to pull it off, which is, I think, it was on her bucket list to go to Las Vegas. So anyway, and the lows were, I don't know if any of you have ever tried to put your family in retirement centers or whatever, but memory care, oh my gosh, trying to find memory care is really rough if you don't either have no money or have a bunch of money, and that was where we were in. I could run a clinic, and I probably will someday, on what it takes to navigate to try to get your loved ones in memory care for dementia and whatever. What a journey that has been. Moving on, let's get to November. In November, the best game I reviewed was Charioteer. Charioteer from GMT Games is a fun 2 to 6 player endeavor where you are playing the part of Ben-Hur 6 times over. It's light, it's simple, it's meant to be approachable, it's meant to be something you could teach and play and still have a good time, and I really, really like it. Highs was I discovered a new sport. I love football, I love basketball. Now it's hockey. My boss was has always been a hockey fan, and so I got to go to several hockey games, NHL hockey games, and see them. And every time I go, my team wins, so I'm 5-0. That was exciting. I didn't realize how cool it was, and so it's always good to find something you like again. And then I discovered Shabu Shabu, my other boss. We went to Japanese food, and again, part of my diet is I'd always eaten American food only. I would turn like, no, I don't want any other, and if it's not American Chinese, I don't want it. If it's not American this or that, and I worked hard to discover new foods, and one of the things was shabu shabu, which is cool. You get this big, hot, freaking boiling thing, and you stick pieces of meat in it and vegetables and whatever, and you just eat it, and it takes like 2.5 seconds for the meat to cook because it's sliced so thin. Anyway, the other good news is finding long-lost relatives. I'd been out of touch with my favorite aunts for many years for reasons we don't get into other than every family's got some quirks. And I finally found them after 30 years of sending a letter every year at Christmas and saying, wherever you are, thank you, I hope you're doing well. I finally found them, and that was really encouraging, particularly with all that was going on elsewhere in the family. What are the lows? It's cold now. Where's my heat? Anyway, I would snowbird if I could, but I'm just lazy. And then the other downside is that the chemotherapy started to lose its efficacy, which means that now a new regimen would have to be tried, and unfortunately those are even more strong at stage 4, which doesn't give a lot of options. And plus that, getting the flu and the cold and having chemo has been really hard on my wife. She's still not actually better. And that was November, so a lot of highs, a lot of lows. Isn't that life? You look at it. And finally, we're at December, and this is December, and I would say that the best game that I played yet, again, it's only the 23rd, but the best game was, I revisited Hitler's Reich and found it just as awesome as it was before. I discovered Heat, not the weather, the game, and really enjoyed that. And I'm currently really enamored with just the polish and just the beautiful lusciousness of Brazil. But there's still, I got a ton of games in, I unboxed them, I haven't played them, whatever. The highs were that I had a really good, my family has been really supportive, having new family back, having my family, my daughters and my son and my wife, and just kind of rallying around and support has been great, because the low point is, despite all of our efforts to get my mom into memory care, she passed away earlier this month. And that was extremely difficult, because the last few years, when you see dementia and Alzheimer's taking its course, and you're doing everything, and you're doing, and it's hard. It isn't just you're helping someone who loves you. Dementia makes everybody evil. It makes every person that has dementia and Alzheimer's, maybe you're one of the small subset of people that can still keep composure when you have dementia, but by and large, the vast majority of cases, you turn into something awful, and years of that awfulness, and then the passing, passed in her sleep, and then you just like, some stories don't have happy endings. Disney's great, but that's not life. And so that was the low point of this month. And that's it for the year in review. Let's get to a couple just quick categories of things that I wanted to mention also. For those of you who may be interested, what was my most watched video this year on Harebrained Games? 303 Squadron. That was the most watched game. What was my least watched video? Viticulture unboxing. Viticulture World, the cooperative game, and I'm okay with that, because I didn't really, the game was okay, but I think I kind of moved past viticulture. Maybe it'll come back to me, but one of my friends got kicked off of BGG because she made a comment about something that was related to something. I don't know. It was pretty innocuous, but they kicked her off because apparently it was mean or something. I don't know. Believe me, I get mean comments here, and that was like maybe 1/10 as mean as some of the stuff that sometimes comes my way. But anyway, that was my least watched video. What was my favorite movie this year? There's Top Gun Maverick by far. I loved the original Top Gun. I love the soundtrack. Oh my gosh. And then this just met, I mean, man, that's just fun cinema. Just tell me a story, don't give me baggage, and that's what it did. The other one that I liked was Netflix redid All Quiet on the Western Front, which I highly recommend for people. I thought that they did a very respectful job and a very good job on that movie. What about TV shows? Well, here's the thing. For years and years, I've tried to watch Doctor Who. I've seen Halloween costumes of Doctor Who and the TARDIS and the pen and Sonic Screwdriver and all that. And every once in a while, I'd start trying to watch the newer ones from the mid-2000s. And I just, like, okay, the first episode, garbage cans come to life, whatever, and whatever, I didn't get it. Then I'm like, you know what, I'm gonna force myself to at least watch through half of the first season with I think it's one of the better Doctor Who's, like, not the old ones, don't know. And then it clicked. Then I understood. Then I got Doctor Who. And so Doctor Who has been my favorite. And again, I've been watching other. Supernatural is good. Amazon originals that aren't called The Rings of Power have been generally decent, etc. and that. But Doctor Who, the thing about Doctor Who that I love is that you don't have these running, like, you have these formal police detective shows or sitcoms or whatever. Doctor Who doesn't have limits. Like, I intentionally do not look at the summary of the episodes because you never know what's going to happen. Literally, you say that in, sometimes people say that in jest, but you don't know because time and space and everything are all up for grabs. And so sure, there's some returning people's exterminate and such, but in general, you never know in an episode what's actually going to happen. And that's cool. That really drew me in, and I don't know if it'll stay that way. I think I'm on season 5 of the new ones, but we'll see. But anyway, it's been worth it. My favorite event was breaking out of my shell, and for the first time since I was 19, going to an actual concert for Sabaton, and what a concert it was. Sabaton are me. Sabaton is a band that just wants to have fun, and they love history, and that's how they do it. At that concert, everything was geared towards just having a good time with the crowd. The crowd was engaged and involved. They were positive. They weren't amped up on anger. They were amped up on just joy. And the homage that Sabaton and the crew did, like this video homage to the World War I exhibit that's being constructed in Washington, D.C., their love of America, their love of all parts, their love of valor. Oh my gosh, loved it. What was my favorite video game? As someone, I returned to Monkey Island. Monkey Island was pivotal in getting me into the board game industry, video game industry, but effectively that got me into the board game industry. And one of the people that I really had the most influence on me early in my career was Ron Gilbert, who I worked with at Humongous Cave Dog, and then at the next company after. Really smart guy, really driven, really passionate, really no BS. And that's exactly the kind of person that I really appreciated and respected him. And so the chance to come back to Monkey Island again and get some grog. My dog's name is Thornton Threepwood III, so take a hint on that one. And then the other game is Horizon Forbidden West. Now, I finally got a machine beefy enough to play it. I enjoyed it. I thought it was cool and stuff. I did dabble in Elden Ring, but only this week. And so I've heard great things. I have no idea whether that will end up being a favorite as well, but definitely Horizon Forbidden West. And a guilty pleasure is Midnight Suns, even though it's not given great praise. I think it's a fun little tactical strategy game. So, what was my favorite gaming moment? Well, it has to be going back to February, Red Flag over Paris with Nick from Around the Table Games. And just the thing is the joy. I just love the fact that he goes and he sells his stuff, and then when it's kind of time for him to finish selling, almost every year I meet up with him. We just sit down, we just play games, we just talk. He's heavy into local politics and civic duty, and so I like to hear how that goes. And he likes to hear about me and what's going on with my long hair. So, favorite board game snack? Nothing. I've had to learn to not snack while playing games, and that has really helped a lot in reducing me from the man I once was, from the mass perspective. And favorite book? There were two books. that really influenced me. One was called "What If Jesus Was Serious?" It's a very short book, about 50 pages, and it really goes over. It's almost like a picture book. It goes over the Sermon on the Mount of Christ, and kind of like asks us. Kind of encourages those of us who are of that faith to, re-examine and make sure that we are not being hypocritical about what he's asking us to do and what we're doing. The other book was 1913. And believe me, there's a lot of books I read. I read a lot of books. But this one's good because this one gave me a perspective a little bit different than your average World War One. Here's how it happened, who started it, the Guns of August, that poor Archduke, and stuff. 1913 does something unusual, and I love it when somebody takes a different perspective that isn't hokey or campy. 1913 is written in a style of someone saying, this is how I think the world thought of itself in 1913. In all parts of the globe. It's spatial, and so you'll have, okay, in 1913, here's how the U.S., here's how Europe was, here's how Berlin was. Oh, let's look over in China and over there. Let's look at some of the other places. What about Africa? What about India? How are these people, how was 1913, how did they think it was going? And you'll see a lot of roots to a lot of things like, globalization and such that are happening in 1913, and it really kind of cuts into questions about how much of that led to World War I and how much of World War I was a surprise to a lot of people, even though it was predicted in a lot of ways. How much of it was a surprise based on how how modern people thought of themselves in 1913? I don't know. Very interesting. It was recommended to me by someone, I think, on Board Game Geek, or not Board Game Geek, or here. Anyway, that was it. So let's wrap it up. What am I looking forward to in 2023? Well, I'm looking forward to closing loose ends. It turns out when you pass away, about 10,472 pieces of paper need to be filed, filled, approved, given, etc. It is a nightmare beyond the emotional nightmare. So my props to anyone who's had to go through this before. Looking forward to new opportunities. I think that next year is going to shift seismically, occupationally, and other things, and to see kind of see what's going on. I'm looking forward to a new regimen for my wife that'll help her out. It's incurable, and so it's a matter of how long we want to make the runway as long as possible, and that's what we're going to do. We're going to we always pray for a miracle, but barring that, it's all about keeping cancer at bay and helping her be as comfortable as she can be until for as long as possible. It's sad, I know that's not this isn't a happy note to end on, but we do feel like the medical people have been fantastic and are doing everything to try and balance that, because when if you can't cure it, then balance it and make sure that my wife can still live and function and enjoy kids and grandkids and all the things that happen, and still hopefully keep the cancer at bay from growing. I want to be, if possible, more active on Harebrained Games. We'll see how that goes. Every year brings with it new opportunities, and some of those opportunities are opportunities to get stuck doing things you don't want to do. You never know. And finally, I'm looking forward to I'm going to go to 2 board game conventions this year, Lord willing, in the River Don't Rise. One is Game On, which I'll always do in February, and in January, I'm going to Cascade Con up towards Canada, right on the border of Canada in Bellingham. I'm going to go see one of my most favorite and cherished board gaming friends who's going to run it, and I'm excited to play games and just enjoy life. So that's it. Now that's me, and I've talked too long. Lord, I've talked too long. I've talked for almost a half an hour. Your guys' turn. I'd love to hear from some of my regulars and stuff. What was your year like? What was your year in review? I've already heard from some people, bless you banking on money for what you're doing and the sacrifices you're making for your family. And what about, others, like highs and lows, baby, highs and lows. So anyway, thanks again, and we'll see you next time on Harebrained Games.
I know.